So guys, with this new update that is going to be releasing, we have the Endless Archive, and I was very interested in trying to make a build that will be able to withstand it, go quite a while into the arcs while still having good amount of DPS and survivability. Now, another thing that Milmanier noticed that there might be another secret sky shard in the depths of the Endless Archive. He tried to kick me off to the side to go find it. However, I took a wrong route and died. But I'm sure if you spend a lot of time jumping off there, you will maybe find a secret sky shard. Let me know down in the comments if you found the secret sky shard. But there's many different ways that you can take a build and get survivability and damage. However, I went more into a very leeching style route. So as you can see, we did end up getting up to arc 4. I could have kept going. I had only lost 1 life during that entire run. The only reason I had stopped was I was just out of time and I had to go do things in real life. So I was not able to continue. But as you can see, it easily was able to finish the final boss on arc 3. Moving on to arc 4, and that placed me at the second highest on the solo run. This was also without a companion, so this can be even faster. It took me about, I'd say about 2 hours total to get to arc 4, which definitely is not the fastest. If you had a really strong specialized DPS and then a tank, that would probably be even faster. However, I just did this solo, so I needed to have my own survivability. Now, when it comes to the Endless Archive, I did notice that the verses that you receive for the temporary buffs are so powerful that it really does change how you're going to want to play your build. So the gear that I'm going to be saying that I ran today, I did not change out anything as far as the gear goes. However, there was many buffs where it would be very worthwhile if you had other weapon types and other skills unlocked to be able to swap back and forth between mag and stam based skills. So first, let's get into this and take a look at the sets. On the front bar, we are using a lightning staff of leeching. This comes from the Imperial City Prison. You can get this on normal or vet. This is using precise and a poison enchant. When leeching is active, you gain 2 lines of max health and healing taken. This is a heavy set. And then when you take damage, you summon a cloud of poison under the enemy that deals damage every second for 5 seconds. And this will heal you for 100% of the damage caused. And it can occur once every 5 seconds, and it scales off of your max health. So like I said, we are doing the lightning staff on the front bar. And then we are actually wearing 4 pieces across the body. We got the feet, legs, hands, and breastplate. All of the big pieces, meaning the legs, breastplate, and helmet, are going to be reinforced. Everything else is divines, and we are doing all max magicka for the enchants. On the back bar, we are using Briarheart. This comes from Hrothgar Overworld. You can buy this from the traders or farm it yourself. We are using a Inferno staff that is infused with the weapon damage enchant. Since this is a medium armor set, we did have to have 1 body piece be medium, so I put that on the waist so you lose the least amount of armor. And then we're using 1 ring and 1 necklace. All the jewelry is going to be bloodthirsty with a spell damage enchant. Briarheart gives you 2 lines of crit chance, max stamina, and then when you deal critical damage, you increase your weapon damage by 450 for 10 seconds, and while this is active, any critical strike that you do will heal you. And this can occur once every 15 seconds, and the heal scales off of your max resources. The important thing about that heal, while it is a very small amount, there is no cooldown as far as how often it can proc. So if you have a lot of dots going on and there's a lot of ads getting hit by those dots, you're going to have tons of crits, and those heals are all going to be stacking with your leeching. And then this goes into our mythic. The setup we have allows us to run a mythic and a full piece monster set. Of course, we are using the Arena Pale Order. I'm not going to go over all the different locations that you have to get the leads, but this will make it so you restore 20% of the damage you deal as health. However, it does decrease by 4% per ally you're grouped with. So this will give us another 20%. Most of our healing does come from this. However, Briarheart and Leeching really do help out a lot. Now for our monster set, I ended up using Maw of the Infernal. Part of this was because initially I was going to run more of a pet-based Sorc based on my permanent buffs that I had received during the run. I ended up getting a buff that made it so my pets did, I think it was about a 45% increase to damage. So I threw this on to help with that. Maw of the Infernal drops from Banished Cells 2. You can do it on Vet, and then you can buy the shoulder from one of the vendors. Once again, we're doing Reinforced on the helmet and Divines on the shoulder. Maw of the Infernal gives you 1 line of max mag, and then when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack, you have a 33% chance to summon a fire-breathing Daedroth for 15 seconds. Every 2 seconds, he deals a lot of damage. He can only be summoned once every 15 seconds, so he will have 100% uptime if you are lucky on those light attacks. And his damage scales off of your spell damage. Now, if you don't want to do this, we are technically about 3k under cap, so another monster set I would recommend would be Bloodspawn. This will give you some extra ulti regen and more resources. Anything to help you get an extra 3k armor would be great, or any other type of healing set, such as Earthcore. Now, during my runs, I did accidentally forget to transmute some of my stuff, so my Briarheart Inferno staff was actually precise, and my 2 jewelry were actually robust. So I did miss out on some of that extra damage that I could have had, so just know the run could have actually been a lot faster. Now for our stats, and this is unbuffed, we're doing 32, 32 in Magicka and health, and we are using the Thief Mundus Stone. For our max mag, we're looking at 31k. For max health, we got 34k. For max stam, we got 16k, about 1k mag recovery, 1k health recovery, and 600 stam recovery. Our spell damage is about 3,400 and crit chance is at 41%. And our resistances unbuffed is actually 22.6k. Now if we buff up here, we do get about 4.6k spell damage and 47% crit chance. Our penetration, we do get about 6k because of some skill options. And like I said, our resistances are about 28.6k. Now if we take a look at our buffs on the trial dummy, we get about 37k health, 33.7k magicka, and 6.4k spell damage, and our mag recovery does get a little bit better. But as you can see, we do have actually kind of decent offensive stats while still having a lot of incoming heals. We actually have another source of incoming heals that I'll get to later. Now with this setup, while it may not be a whole lot, we only have 3 DOTs, a main spammable, and then a strong burst skill. So we actually don't have a whole lot of damaging skills, but even with all that, we do still hit for about 40k DPS on the trial dummy. So it does have an okay amount of damage, but like I said, this is more talking about survivability while still being able to actually get through the ad waves. Now for the consumables, during the fights, I was using the tri-stat potions to gain all 3 resources and recoveries. Depending on the setup you do, you might want to run spellcaster potions. However, it is dangerous because you are not going to get your stam back, and you do use a lot of both resources in the Endless Archive. Now for the food, I usually don't do this, but I did end up using the Clockwork Citrus Fillet. This gives you max health, health recovery, max mag, and mag recovery. It's the best of all worlds. Another option, if you don't want to spend that much money, you can get Witch Mother's Potent Brew. That will give you max mag, mag recovery, and health. And if you for some reason decide you don't want that much health, which I would seriously recommend it because they do knock you down to like half health with almost cap resists and 34k health. So if you're low on health, you're gonna get one shot, but you could just do the Ghastly Eyeball if you just want to go max mag and mag recovery. And now for the skills. So I am going to cover the skills that should always stay on your bar depending on the buffs you get. For the temporary buffs, you might want to swap out your main spammable and some other skills. However, there are permanent buffs that will massively enhance your gameplay. So depending on those things, that's where you might start looking at changing your gear setup. Maybe you want a bow instead of staves. Maybe you want to completely swap out into a stam build rather than mag focus. So there's different setups for this. So I would suggest having a lot of skills unlocked, a lot of different weapon lines unlocked, and be ready to be able to swap out gear, and definitely a lot of skills depending on the buffs you get. So like I said, I'm going to cover the ones that should always be there that I ended up using, and then I will leave the miscellaneous slots empty for now. So first up, I was using Inner Light all the time. This is from the Mages Guild. This gives you Major Prophecy, which increases our crit chance. And while it's slotted, our max mag is increased by 5%, and from passes it does another, I believe, 2%. Next up, from the Dark Magic line, we are using Dark Conversion. This costs 3k stam, and it'll give you 10k health, 4.5k mag, and an additional 3k mag over 20 seconds. It also grants you Minor Berserk for 20 seconds, increasing your damage done by 5%. Next up, from the Psijic Order line, we are using Race Against Time. This is not necessarily required. You could just do Beast Trap or Channeled Acceleration. However, I did this morph as a lot of the time I just needed to pop it right then and now, because this will give you Minor Force for 20 seconds, which you can get from the other morph or Beast Trap, but it'll give you 30% more movement speed for 4 seconds. So it is nice in a burst, but it also removes all snares and immobilizations from you and grants immunity to them for 4 seconds. So I'll hit this if I'm out of stam, or if I don't want to use my stam to break free, you can hit this instead to get out of there. Next up, from the Daedric Summoning line. This is where, depending on your setup, you might want to change this. If you are going in with pets, I would do the other morph. However, I usually don't like using the pets on a Sorc. So I went with Haunting Curse from the Daedric Summoning line. When you hit this, it'll do a massive amount of damage to one target and additional damage to all other targets after 3.5 seconds. And then it'll explode a second time after an additional 8.5 seconds. However, you can only have one target at a time. And then for our front bar ulti, I was using Flawless Dawnbreaker. I would never actually use this unless the boss is in execute and I do not have my main ulti available. This is here mainly for passives. However, if you do hit this, it does cost cheaper since we are a Sorc for passives, but it'll do massive damage to all enemies in front of you in a conal attack, and then some extra DOT damage over 6 seconds. And after activating, your spell damage is increased by an additional 300 for 20 seconds. Now on the back bar, in the Stormcalling line, this is one of the other sources of healing, Critical Surge. When you hit this, you gain Major Sorcery, so it increases our spell damage by 20%. And while it's active, whenever you deal critical damage, it heals you for a massive amount, but it can occur once every second. So between this, Leeching, Briarheart, and the Pale Orderine, just for doing damage, we are healing. So I rarely had to use Dark Conversion or a ward or anything like that. I rarely had to do anything like that to sustain my life. I was able to just do damage, focus on damaging people, getting past faster because I'm doing damage while healing. Next up, in the Destruction line, we are using Unstable Wall of Elements. When you hit this, it puts a giant carpet in front of you, dealing damage every second, and then it'll explode at the end of its duration. Since we are using Unstable Wall of Fire, it does additional damage to burning enemies. And if you don't have any good AoE skills, you can spam this to make that explosion proc instantly. Next up, in the Daedric Summoning line, we are using Bound Aegis. While this is slotted on either ability bar, we gain 8% more max magicka, Minor Resolve, and Minor Protection, increasing our resistances and reducing damage taken by 5%. And if you do need, you can hit this and it'll make your block mitigation increase by 40% for 5 seconds. So if you're about to take a massive hit that you know has been hurting you, you can hit that right before you need a block. And then lastly, for our stable skills, we're using Hurricane. This morph is preferred just because it is stam. We use a lot of mag skills, so I needed to balance something out. When you hit this, you deal damage in an AoE around you for 20 seconds, and every 2 seconds it'll deal damage. It'll grow in damage and size, up to 120% more damage and up to 9 meters in size. And while this is active, you also gain minor expedition the entire time and major resolve, increasing your resistances and increasing your movement speed. So between that and our race against time, we are actually quite mobile with this setup, even though we're all in heavy armor, which helps us get out of the AoE. And then for our ultimate on the Daedric summoning line, we are using Greater Atronach Storm. When you hit this, its arrival will cause a upfront damage and then stun enemies for 3 seconds. And then it'll start zapping the closest enemy every second, dealing a lot of damage. And if you do have an ally, they can synergize, which will grant everyone Major Berserk for 10 seconds, increasing their damage done by 10%. Now, back to the front bar, one of the main spammables I was using was Crushing Shock from the Destro line. This does Flame Shock and Frost damage, and then it also interrupts enemies and set them off balance and stuns them for 3 seconds. I used this a lot of the time, especially during bosses. Anytime there was someone that needed to be interrupted, this was my go-to skill. However, because it's random, you never know if you're going to need it or not. So during ad waves, I never had this. I only use this on bosses. Now, occasionally, you might get something that says, like, you deal extra damage for damage over time. So you might want to use Destructive Reach for that extra damage over time damage. Now, when it came to the ad waves, I used Pulsar. Spamming this on the shock staff allows us to deal an additional 30% damage if there's enough enemies to everyone around you, and it massively just nukes them down. And because it passes, you also get a lot of restoring resources for it. Now, as far as the back bar skill that was flexy, most of the time when it came to ads, I used Razor Caltrops. This is a stam skill from the assault line. It deals damage every second, it reduces movement speed by 50%, and they get major breach on them. Since we don't have a tank doing any type of breach, you want to have some source of breach, and this is really helpful on the ads. Now, when it's a boss, especially during a mobile fight, you will lose your DPS. However, it gives you the breach on the boss at all times, basically. So in some ways, if it's a mobile fight, you'll get better DPS. I used Elemental Drain. It puts breach on the enemy for 1 minute, and minor Magicka Steal. Now, occasionally they might buff certain types of damage. So if they buff your martial damage, I would have swapped to a bow and maybe have gotten Acid Spray, Poison Injection, or Lethal Arrow, and possibly Volley, depending on the buffs that they give you. Now, another option, I did not do this. You could be a vampire if you want for another source of healing and get the Blood Mist, so that way you can start doing damage to more people and healing from it. Now, because we only have a very few amount of skills that actually do damage, the rest are all just buffs. It is actually a very easy rotation. Just make sure all of your buffs are up. Your main priority is going to be making sure they have breach on them somehow. Wall of Elements to get your infused weapon damage enchant, and then you're going to want your Daedric Curse, that way you start getting some explosion damage, and then just start spamming your Pulse or your Crushing Shock. Now, another thing is quite often I would get buffs to my heavy attacks. There was one permanent buff that made it so your heavy attacks deal an additional like 60k damage over 6 seconds. It's a massive amount of damage. And then there's another temporary buff where you would gain like 31 ultimate every 3 seconds when you heavy attack. So if you were to heavy attack on your fire staff, you can hit Mage's Light to gain your Empower, swap to your fire staff, and then when you heavy attack the enemy, they get a DOT on them that does a good amount of damage. They get that permanent buff damage that can usually almost one-shot them if they're a normal ad. And then you gain tons of ultimate. So there's a lot of synergy that you can get from these buffs. So you just need to pay attention to what ones you're wanting and see what skills you have available to get benefits from them. And now for the CP. In the blue CP, I used Wrathful Strikes to gain 200 more spell damage, Fighting Finesse to gain more critical damage. You're not going to be behind anyone most of the time unless you are with a partner who's a tank. So they're all going to be facing you, so just do Fighting Finesse, not Backstabber. And then I used Biting Aura to gain more AoE damage and Thaumaturge for more DOT damage. In the red tree, I used Boundless Vitality for more health, Fortified for more armor, Siphoning Spells to gain 1500 mag whenever I kill enemies, and bloody renewal for 1500 stam when I kill enemies. Now for our passes, I'm just going to cover the passes that actually help this build. All passes will help your build in some way. These are just going to be the ones that are really focused towards this. In the dark magic line, you'll want to get Unholy Knowledge. This reduces the cost of all of your non-core combat abilities by 6%. Blood magic is going to give you an additional heal every time you hit an enemy with a dark magic ability. So if you used your Daedric Tomb skill, you would get that, and it can occur every half second and scales off of your max health. Persistence, since you will need to block quite often, especially on boss heavy attacks, the next ability that you use will cost 15% less. Exploitation is going to be a massive help, and this will be procced quite often by your Dark Convergence. When you cast any dark magic ability, you gain Minor Prophecy to you and your group, which gives you more critical chance. Now this is on 20-second window, which is the same as Dark Conversion, so just keep Dark Conversion up and you will be fine. In the Daedric Summoning line, Rebate will give you more resources whenever your Haunting Curse ends. Power Stone reduces the cost of your ultimates by 15%. Daedric Protection increases health and stam recovery by 20% for having a Daedric ability slotted. And then Expert Summoner gives you 8% more max health while you have a Daedric summoning ability active on you. In the Storm Calling line, Capacitor gives you 10% more mag recovery. Energized gives us more physical and shock damage by 5%. Amplitude does a reverse execute, so the more health that the enemies have, the more damage we do against them. And then Expert Mage gives us 2% more spell damage for every sorcerer ability slotted. In the Destro line, Trifocus makes it so when you heavy attack with a fire staff, they gain an additional DOT on them, and it's actually a very strong DOT. And then a fully charged lightning staff allows all nearby enemies to take 100% of the damage done. Penetrating magic makes your Destro Staff abilities ignore an additional 3k resistances. Elemental Force increases your chance to apply status effects by 100%. Ancient Knowledge makes your Inferno stabs deal 12% more DOT damage and status effect damage, and Lightning Stabs increase your damage done to direct damage and channeled effects by 12%. And then Destruction Expert, if you kill an enemy with a Destruction Staff ability, you restore 3600 mag. In the Medium Armor tree, you will want to get Dexterity. This increases your crit damage. Windwalker increases your stam recovery and reduces the cost of stam abilities. Agility increases your spell damage. And Athletics will increase your movement speed and reduce the cost of roll dodge. In the heavy line, since you will want to be mainly heavy, Resolve increases more resistances, Constitution gives more health recovery, and you restore resources whenever you take damage once every 4 seconds. Juggernaut increases your max health. Revitalize increases the amount of resources you do restore by a heavy attack, which depending on your setup, you might want to be heavy attacking because of the permanent buffs. And then Rapid Mending increases your healing received. In the Fighters Guild line, you will want to get Slayer. This increases your spell damage by 3%. This will only affect us on our front bar. Same with Banish the Wicked, which gives us 3 ultimate whenever we kill an enemy. So you will want to mainly be killing adds on your front bar with your Destro Staff Pulsar skill. In the Mages Guild line, you will want to get Magicka Controller. This increases your max mag and mag recovery by 2%. And Might of the Guild. If you do plan on doing heavy attack damage, if you get some sort of permanent buff for it, this will give you Empower anytime you use a Mage Guild ability, which increases the damage done of your heavy attacks against monsters by 70% for 10 seconds. And we do have Inner Light, so you can hit that if you need it to. And if you do plan on that, you might want to get Mage Adept, so it reduces the cost of the abilities by 15%. If you are using the Psijic Order, Clairvoyance reduces the cost by 15%. Spell Orb gives you additional damage whenever you use your abilities. Concentrating Barrier is really nice. It gives you a 5k damage shield whenever you block, and it can occur once every 10 seconds. In the Undaunted line, you will want Undaunted Command. If you do work with a partner, anytime you do a synergy, you gain more resources. And Undaunted Metal increases the max pool of your resources. Now we are a Dark Elf. This gives us about 1900 mag and stam. It gives us more flame resist and increases our spell damage. And then lastly, you will want to get medicinal use in the alchemy line so your potions last 100% uptime. So I'm just going to beat on this dummy here. This will only be the effect of one boss. So as far as healing, you can get a sense of how that works. Now they are not attacking me, so leeching will not be benefiting me at all, but we can take a look at my overhealing at the end of this. Okay guys, so I didn't go kill him all the way. It was taking quite a bit and I don't have the patience for that at this level of DPS. Like I said, it's not going to be a great DPS. I mean, we are mostly heavy and not using good DPS skills or sets. However, as you can see, we did get 44.7k DPS, so not horrible. However, this is all, like I said, in heavy armor. As you can see, we do get a good amount of crit damage, crit chance, and spell damage, so we're definitely not bad here. Now, our light attacks seem to be doing the most damage here, but like I said, it's not necessarily about the damage. We want to look at the healing done. Okay, look at this. Absolute amount of healing done. So this is with one target and no leeching involved here. With one dummy, no leeching involved, we have almost 2.8 million healing overall over 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So this is about 230 seconds. If you divide that from here, you get about 12.1k healing per second. This is with one target. Just adding in a second target is going to double that, and triple if you have 3. So like it continues, and without leeching. So this is a massive amount of healing that we can get just from doing damage. The only time we'll die is if you fail a mechanic and it insta kills you, if you get yeeted off the edge for trying to find a secret sky shard, or if you're getting to the point where the enemies get so high level that they're just going to insta kill you. And with how close we are to cap resists, if you did want to do your Lady Mundus Stone to gain the extra resistances, you could do that, and that will let you get a little further without getting insta killed. But there will be a point where you're going to start getting insta killed, and at that point you can decide if you want to start swapping stuff out for more mitigation, but you are very quickly going to start losing your DPS, and it's going to slow down a lot from there. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you guys want to see more of this content and possibly any other Endless Archive builds. I was quite proud with how quick this jumped up. I had heard how difficult it is, especially if you're a tank. It really starts slowing down if you are trying to do it as a full tank, but as a full DPS, you are definitely going to get wiped. And this setup worked very well for me. Obviously, since we're on PTS, having access to all these skills does help when it comes to being able to swap out your abilities. However, I did my best to not go too crazy with that. I wasn't swapping out any gear. I would recommend to swap out gear depending on what you get. Like I said, swap out your weapons, change into a stam build or a mag build or a heavy attack build, whatever you need to get the job done. So guys, if there's any other builds you would like me to try and make, I love doing off-meta builds that still work and function in ESO's content. If there's any class you'd like me to do next for the Endless Archive builds, please let me know it down in the comments, and let me know what you're most excited for in the Endless Archive update. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.